leaves, or set up the battlefield if they are having problems setting up the battlefield and they can't find anyone else to help them. So it's important
down into several different positions. Basically, it's about managing a team and preparing for the event. So I'm just going to go through a list of all the staff that you need. You need to know every position decently well to be able to run an event. So, because one of the autocrats or the event, awesome, thank you. One of the event requirements for being an autocrat is to be able to fill in when necessary. So you need to know each individual part of your event. So it's very important to know the different duties required for the event. So I'm going to start with the main person, the autocrat or the event coordinator. There's work you have to do before, during, and after the event. Each section, each person, I will break down the before, during, and after event requirements. So the event coordinator usually has to do a bid in many kingdoms to be able to run the event. So you have to be able to set a budget. You have to be able to manage, get your team together, and kind of outline what your ideas are. So that's the first requirement. Usually that is a team effort. You don't just do it yourself. You work with a couple people to outline something. But I'm not really talking about the bidding process here because that's very unique per kingdom because each kingdom does it a little differently. But one of the first things you have to do is, as the autocrat, is make a budget and set the event price. So basically, you break it down into how much money you need to break even, how many people you need to break even with, and then you set your price based on that. A lot of times you'll have like an idea that you want to do like a $40 event, so you price things appropriately for that $40 limit. It's getting harder and harder to do $40 in our area, anyways. So I'm basically you charge however much you need to get the event that you want. I'm not going into details about budget, but that is one thing that you have to do as autocrat. The other thing is you're responsible for overseeing everyone's job. So you have to make sure they're doing it in a timely manner, answering questions because there will be questions about how you want to direct your event. But it's basically your job to make sure that they get their job done at the appropriate time within the time allowed. And you set those time limits. And if they're not meeting the deadline, then you have to work with them to find out a good compromise to make sure they do it. There's some chances that you might actually have to fire someone, but that's pretty rare in my experience. Another thing you have to do, you might have to do this before you get the bid, is find a site. And if you don't have a site manager, which is another position that is optional, you also have to book it yourself. So looking for a site is very important. You have to figure out what you need. I wrote an article about evaluating sites that would be appropriate here. So check out my webpage, baelnorn.com. It's under articles. Once you have figured out what you need from a site and you found a site, you'll have to book the site. You also have to deal with finding insurance based on the insurance that is required for the site that you've booked. That varies depending on the requirements of the site. So you'll need to work with the site to find out the kind of insurance that you'll need to be able to use the site. One important goal or important job that may not be yours actually, depending on the kingdom, is to hand out the money to the appropriate people at the appropriate times. Money for the site is paid for at a different time than money for the feast, money for the gate favors if you have gate favors, or the money for the gate supplies. They all happen at different times, and you need to hand out the money to the appropriate people, or in some cases buy the supplies yourself and hand the supplies to the appropriate people. So managing your time is very important. you also need to make and post a schedule. A lot of times I will say this is the schedule that we're going to have, and then I'll talk to like the events coordinator or the workrat, some people call them. Uh, this is the time that you have to fit games and tournaments in, and then they have to make it accordingly. And there's some give and take there, so you have to work with your team to make the schedule. But it's your main responsibility to make that and have it posted. Those are pretty much the before event jobs that you have. They're not too difficult. It's just a lot of time management, really, and people management. During the event, you have to manage the various managers, make sure that they're doing their jobs. You have to make sure the gate uh, manager is managing their um, job, and you have to make sure the worker is doing their job. And if you have a security, which I'll talk about security later, you have to make sure they're doing their job, and so on and so on. So your primary responsibility is to make sure people are doing their jobs. Um, then the next thing is make sure things are running on schedule. It goes back to making sure people are doing their jobs, but you had to work with the work rat, and if he's having trouble or they're having trouble working on um, finding reefs, for example, then you might need to take time out of your day to help them find reefs, or set up the battlefield if they are having problems setting up the battlefield and they can't find anyone else to help them. So it's important to do what you can to make sure that the events are running on time. Same thing goes for gates. You might need to check in with your gate manager to make sure that their schedule is running on time and their volunteers are getting into position. Um, that is less of your worry, but you still need to check in to make sure that things in that department are going well and running on schedule. Uh, then there is problem solving. You need to be able to think on your feet because who knows what will happen. Um, one time I had no one show up for gate shifts, so we had to problem solve that. Didn't really like the problem solving because I ended up having to sit the gate for that shift because we couldn't find anyone to do it, and it was a really small camp out, so we didn't have very many volunteers. So that was how I solved that problem. I did it myself. So you have to be prepared to step in. That's not always possible. That is the last case scenario, but it's just an example of you having to solve a problem. I did it a lot as a feastocrat, as solving problems, and sometimes you have to work with the autocrat to, you have to go buy some new supplies, you have to extend the budget, or some piece of equipment isn't working, and so the feast manager would have to work around that, and they would have to work with the autocrat to make sure everything is going as planned. So there needs to be communication. So if there's a problem in the lower management that can't be solved, then they need to talk to the upper management, the autocrat, to make sure that it can be solved. They need to be kept in the loop. You need to be prepared to take over someone's role if necessary. Uh, my previous example, taking over the role of the volunteers. 1 year in Shattered Kingdoms, I was basically the autocrat, shared responsibility as warcrat, and basically ran gate. This is when it was a smaller, one of the first couple of years. We have volunteers to fill it in now, but I had to fill in because we were unable to find people to fill the role. Um, I've had to find people to fill roles randomly. So even if you are unable to fill the role, maybe you have to find someone to fill the role. For example, one pack war, I think it was ran by Iris Theory. Their feast crat got sick last minute, couldn't um, come to the site. All the food's there and ready to go, but they still had to kind of like cook it and stuff like that. And she came to me. I was randomly there for the day, and she said, "Could you fill in for the feast crat and cook the feast?" I'm like, "Sure." She problem solved. She found someone that she knew was responsible and filled the position because she couldn't do it herself. So if you can't do it yourself, that you have to find someone that can. But filling in is a last resort. But it's possible you have to do that. You also have to be in contact with the site owners to make sure things are running smoothly. So usually on a site, there'll be a point of contact for you for the site. The site managers will come through. They'll usually check, see how things are going. They will empty some trash cans sometimes, depending on the site. But they talk to you, so you have to keep an idea of what's going on in the whole area. Is it being cleaned up? Are people treating it nicely? Is there going to be some surprise that the site manager found that she's going to, or they're going to talk to you about? And so you need to be aware of the things going on the site, because the site manager for the campground you're using will be talking to you and relaying information to you that you'll have to relay to everyone else. Um, Autocrat also has a lot of after event responsibilities, probably more so than any other of the positions. You have to pay for the site if necessary. If you, um, usually a lot of per person per sites you pay after the event. It's very rare that I've seen where you just pay for the whole site up front anymore. I saw that 10 years ago or more, but it really depends on the agreement you have with the site. So one responsibility might be paying for the site. Uh, Best practice for receipts and sign-in sheets: scan them. So you have a copy, you can send a digital copy, and you can give the physical receipts to the kingdom if they would like. Most kingdoms would. So it's good for your own records. So you cover yourself. You make sure it really accessible for the kingdom, so they don't have to scan them, and they don't have to go through a bunch of paperwork. I'm sure they'll still look through the paperwork, but having physical copy or digital copies is just, it's good practice. Count the money, do the books, and give the money to the appropriate person. So this really depends on the kingdom you're in and how they handle their money. Um, you will need to probably count the money, give it over. It might need to be done at the event, might be done after the event. You might need to do the books at the event or within the next couple weeks. I think Black Spire is within 2 weeks. You have to hand over all the money and the books and all that good stuff. Consult your bylaws or policies. It's probably in your policies um, for the appropriate money handling guidelines if your kingdom has them. You give the sign-ins to the appropriate person. So usually you give the digital copies and the physical copies, or if you didn't do a scan, just the physical copies. Typically for the kingdom prime minister, unless your bylaws and policies say otherwise. It's very good to do a wrap-up post, doing the highs, lows, thank people, uh, your managers, and your departments. Um, any notable volunteers, stuff like that. It's very individual up to the person running the post, but try to be positive. Talk about the highlights. It's good to put in the tournament wins. If there's any notable battles, themes that have conclusions, if it's more RP focused, just any pertinent information, and be positive. Those are the takeaways. Submit award recommendations. This is very important. I have to admit, I've been bad at this some years. I've been a lot better, but you should, and I should mention this during the event, you should probably keep a running list of all the people that you see that deserve awards. So after the event, you don't have to think back on the event like, well, who did what and did they deserve this and all that good jazz. So awards are important. You should get recommendations from all your departments. It's also good policy to find out what kingdom and local park they're in. It's important to look up their org to see if they deserve an award at the level that they meet their criteria for, and then submit that to the appropriate holding. If it's holding level, submit it to the holding level. If it's kingdom level, submit it to the kingdom, and so forth. So that takes a bit of time, depending on um, the size of the event, and sometimes it can be unwieldy. But it's very important in our game to make sure everyone gets the recognition they deserve. And it really sucks when you're overlooked. I get overlooked a lot, and I know other people get overlooked a lot. So I'm more aware of people's contributions to the game and hope they get appropriately awarded. Optional rule, but nice. Wrap up went wrong, or you write a post to yourself. You don't post this. You write up what went wrong about the event, what went right about the event, and what you do to improve. It's nice for you to be able to reflect on your job, and all positions should do this. And I'll mention it when I get to them, but it's important that they, or that you reflect on what you did, what you can improve, what you're good at, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then you can hand off the packet to the next autocrat if it's a bid process and someone else might be running it next year, so they know what went wrong, what they can improve upon, and it's just a really nice continuation uh, to a continuation of information to allow people to better improve upon the previous year's events and to always make them better and to miss pitfalls they may not have thought about. So it's important. It's not a requirement. Like I said, it was optional, but it's another good practice. Then another position, this is optional, is site manager. I have used site managers in the past. It's basically before the event, they work with the event coordinator to find an appropriate site. So they'll go out, they'll contact different sites, get pricing information. They will contact the site, get the limitations and the amenities, then report back to the event coordinator with sites that are appropriate, things that will work for the event. Then they will work with the event coordinator to book the site. Generally speaking, the event coordinator will actually sign the paper and hand over the money. The site manager is mostly just there to help facilitate finding a good site. It's better to have more than one person looking for a site. I've used site managers because I exhaust my knowledge of available sites in my area, and someone that's better at searching will take the lead and try to find a good site. So site managers can be very important if it's something that you personally lack. And it's always good to find people that complement you. Sir Uriel has been someone that has helped a lot with looking for sites, and I really appreciate them for doing that. Optionally, you can roll us into the clean team position. This is something I haven't done. I've never used clean teams before, but I'll talk about that as probably the last position. But after a recent event, I've decided that whenever I run an event, I want to have a clean team. So you could optionally roll a site manager into the clean team manager, so they have a before event and during event role. So it's not just a wasted space. Any questions so far? I have no idea what the delay is, so I'm just going to wait 30 seconds to see if anyone responds. In the meantime, I'm drinking a beer. Milwaukee's best. One of my friends, Uriel and I used to call it the Beast, Milwaukee's best ice. But they're telling me back east they just call Milwaukee's best the Beast. So they call Milwaukee's best ice the Yeti because it's the Ice Beast. So I've been calling it Yeti. Now, at least I'm trying to. Just on that last pack war, actually. So, no questions. So we'll move on to the next position, Feast Manager. This is a position I know very well. I basically earned my belt on Feast. Not every award I got was Feast. I think one of the awards was for doing the website. The rest were for Feast. My masterhood was, as stupid as it sounds, was for running events, which shouldn't be a requirement for the Rose Path, but that's what I was told it was. So to get masterhood and my yes vote, I had to do events. That's kind of silly. But that was an older Amtgard carryover. I was knighted in the realm of the award standardization, but only a couple years after it was formalized. Anyways, so Feast Manager. Before the event, you need to talk with the event coordinator or autocrat about a budget. You may have to come up with the budget, or you might have to make a budget proposal. It really depends on how you work with the or with the autocrat, but it needs to be. Oh, hello, Casey or Demetria. Yeah, not being a requirement is, yeah, I agree too. That's why I said it. Thanks for coming to the stream. So as I was saying, they need to work on a budget. Um, I figured out through doing feasts that I can do a feast basically for $3 a person. And then I kind of fit the meal to that budget. I just have some staples I go to. I've just done it so often that I kind of know, and I keep an eye on food prices and stuff. I try to, but if your feastocrat isn't as well informed, or they're not as experienced, they might have to go around and do some shopping, come up with some ideas, and feast manager will come up with a working budget, talk to the autocrat to see if that is feasible, and they kind of negotiate what they want to do and stuff like that. It's a give and take, and it'll be different for every team, but that's the basic process. Um, the feastocrat will also have to come up with a menu. That kind of goes with the budget, not always. Like I said, I will have a budget, and then I'll work with the budget to come up with the menu. But they need to come up with the menu before the event, obviously. The feast manager has to practice the recipe. Uh, First, I have a guide to doing feasts about 5 pages long with examples, and it's pretty in depth. It's on Baelnorn.com, so I'm kind of going over that now. But they need to practice the recipe. First, you do a regular meal to see if you like the recipe. If you can do the price at the price point is fine. Then once that works out and the meal is perfectly fine, they need to upscale it to do a bigger feast, maybe like 10 or 15 people. You get some friends over. Basically, can you scale up the menu? They have to practice this recipe, um, so nothing goes wrong at the event, and things still go wrong. But they need to practice, make sure it's scalable. For one thing, rice does not scale. Maybe if you have a really big rice cooker and you can do it for 50 to 100 people, or you have several rice cookers, you might be able to do it for more people. But rice is not scale. You can't just cook it in a pan like you normally would. Um, that's why I just won't do rice. So that's one thing you can find by scaling up the recipe if there's going to be problems. Um, Generally, this comes out of your own pocketbook as a feast manager. It kind of sucks, but you're eating the meal and you have your friends help pay for it if it's like a party or something like that. So there's ways to mitigate the cost, but effectively you're cooking food for yourself, but you're practicing. It's just like if you're a garber and you practice sewing things for fun, and you have to pay for the, as unfair as it might sound, you have to pay for the materials because you're not. It doesn't come out of the event fund because their event funds are really small. Um, Once you have all that taken care of, you have the meals upscaled, then you have to get the money from the event coordinator. And I usually got the money a couple months in advance. I didn't buy stuff until about the month before, but I made sure I tried to get it months in advance because I've had so many times where it was hard to connect with the event coordinator or the prime minister, if that's who's giving out the money, to actually get the money for the feast. So getting that money months in advance is a good idea because sometimes it will take a couple months to get that money. Then you have to buy all the things that are necessary. Make a list before you go in and check it as you go in. After you're done shopping, you make another list of everything that you've bought. And then you have to transport the items to the site. You take that list of all the items you bought, you check it off as you pack it into the car. Otherwise, you might forget something. That's very important. You also need to find volunteers to help you. Most positions, you'll have to find volunteers to help you. And this is a before event stuff. You can do it at the event, but it's important to find people that will help you at the event before the event, so you can kind of key them in into the strategy that you're going to take when you go to the kitchen. It's very important. I had one helper named Vincent. He helped me ever since high school, and that was in 1999. I think we did our first feast in like 2000. and he's been like my right hand guy for almost all of my feasting career. And everyone should have a Vincent. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I'm at. Even though he was my helper rather than I be his helper, but there is a synergy there. So finding a volunteer, especially someone you can trust, is important. Um, Actually, for every position, having a someone that you can trust to help you, your backup, very important. Um, so think about that for all positions. Um, Transport, or yeah, I already said transport item. Sorry. During the event, once you get the site, take your checklist, unload everything. When you're putting things away, you double check that you have everything that you thought you had in the car in the kitchen. If something is not right and you're missing something somehow, or once you get to the site they don't have pots or pans that you're expecting, or you just plumb forgot something. Um, Demetria said having a second that you can rely on and work with is super important. Yes, it is. Um, Once you're there, if you miss something, you have to go to the store, and you have to. That's why you have to do this ASAP if you're the feast manager. And the autocrat needs to go to the feast manager when they arrive on site and talk to them. They have to talk to them after they've unloaded to make sure everything is there. If you can't go yourself, you get your second to go or someone else that you trust. Then, while you're on the site, you cook the meal, you serve the meal. Demetria is known for serving meals, so you can get someone and you can outsource that responsibility. Um, so you can do buffet line, or you can do meal service, um, or you can find someone to do the meal service for you, like Demetria. It's also important after the meal you clean up. There's been a problem in our area for a little while for some people to not clean up the kitchen. Um, it's happened for a couple years now with some people, uh, and so it's important that that people understand that the feast manager's job is to clean the kitchen. If you don't clean it yourself, which I don't anymore very often, I find people that I trust to clean up the kitchen, because I mean cooking all day, it's a lot of work, and maybe you don't have the steam to clean, but it's still your responsibility to make sure it gets clean. If and after your helpers clean up the kitchen, you go in there, you look to see if it's clean. If it's not clean, you just clean it at that point. It might be a very late night, but it's your responsibility in the end to make sure that it's clean. And it's not clean team's responsibility. Clean teams has a whole other responsibility. It is the responsibility of the feast to make sure their kitchen is clean. During the event, you hand over all the receipts and change to the event coordinator. Um, Generally, I will do that when I arrive on site, so you don't have to carry all that around. You might need some change to go to the store to buy some stuff, so maybe you don't hand over the money just yet, and you hand over the receipts. But by the end of the event, all that stuff has to go to the event coordinator. After the event, write a thank you post. Thank the people that helped you, people that helped serve, the people that helped the kitchen, people that helped clean, anyone that helped you. Optional but nice, and this will be for pretty much all positions. Write up what went wrong, what went right, what you could do to improve. It's nice to reflect on. Um, I did that similar. I did something similar almost every feast I went to, or that I cooked at. Except it was just a conversation I had with Vincent about what we could do better and stuff like that. So there's like having a breakdown, very important if you want to improve on your skills. Um, then you need to hand over reward recommendations to the event coordinator, and or submit them yourself. It looks better if two people are submitting reward recommendations. So I would recommend that you do the award recommendations yourself, as well as give them to the autocrat so they can put in award recommendations. People are more likely to get the awards they deserve when multiple people recommend them for their awards. Gate manager, or gate autocrat. Before the event, they have to work with the event coordinator to determine what info needs to be recorded for gate. For example, do you need to keep track of where people are camping, or do you just need to keep track of who is there? Um, if for sites that have cabins, it gets more complicated, especially if they can pre-book the cabins or if there's auctions for certain cabins. So that information is kept at gate. So the gate manager needs to work with Autocrat to figure out what their responsibility is when it comes to keeping that information, recording it, and giving out that information. Demetria says keeping two sets of records for recommendations is great. One to hand to the coordinator and one to keep for yourself. Yep. Um, it's important that everyone gets the recognition they deserve. It's not the primary motivation factor that you'd want, but it's nice to feel appreciated. Um, so you need to also, for the game manager, go over money handling procedures with the event coordinator. This also might be covered in your kingdom's policies. I know Blackspire recently submitted and got approved a proposal for gate handling money. I don't know very well. I need to be more well versed in that. I haven't run an event yet, which it mattered, but I will be here shortly. Well, at the end of the year, provided it doesn't get canceled. No plans for canceling, by the way. Probably shouldn't have said that. Sorry, but so I should be more well versed in them. But basically, know your money handling procedures. The event coordinator also needs to know this. Um, Create a gate schedule and gather volunteers. Do this as soon as there is a you should do this before there is a schedule out, a main schedule. If they're doing like a late schedule, on some events they only do a schedule of the first couple weeks. I try to put my schedule out a month, maybe 2 months in advance if possible, because it's easier to get volunteers. So the gate manager would solicit people to volunteer for gate shifts, but if the main schedule isn't out, they might not want to volunteer because they want to wait until there is a schedule so they know if there's events they don't want to miss, stuff like that. So it's important to get out your schedule as early as you reasonably can so that the gate manager and other managers can solicit people for volunteer activities. But a responsibility is to create a gate schedule and gather volunteers. You need to make sure all gate supplies you need, such as pins, lockbox, wristbands, printouts, such as the sign-in, prepaid list, stuff like that. Make sure you have all those. Um, Sometimes the event coordinator will be the one providing all those supplies to you. You just need to work with the event coordinator and make sure that communication is open and that they know who has the items to be able to make sure the gate can open and run smoothly. And make sure you have the prepaid list. Uh, Usually, the gate manager will not be the one responsible for starting the prepays or getting the prepays. They need to make sure they have the prepaid list at gate. During the event, you set up gate. You need to be there before gate opens. Um, I recommend an hour if possible. Half an hour, probably minimum. Uh, and you'll have to work with the event coordinator probably because they'll have, in most cases, they will have some stuff for gate. The event coordinator will be on site before you. So work with them and set up gate. Go over procedures with the event coordinator. Talk about money drops when you want to do them, stuff like that, so you know when you need to be around gate to supervise. You should always check in later, periodically, and make sure gate is going well. But having a money drop schedule is important, or knowing if you have X amount of money, then you'll do a money drop. So it's important to know, talk with the event coordinator to determine that schedule. Um, they need to go over gate procedure with staff. I like to go over it with as many people as possible. So I'll try to get people that are not at the first gate shift to be there, and I go over the gate shift procedures with the people that are scheduled first, as well as many as I can find, so I don't have to repeat myself. But you will have to probably repeat yourself several times. You make sure you go over very well. Gustav actually started doing a list, like a procedure list that he just left at gate. I don't think I've seen that very often or really at all, but I I'm sure someone else has thought about it, but that was really good. So you can just leave it at a gate in case people have questions. I think I'll be requiring that for all future gate uh, managers going forward. Um, but yeah, go over procedures with the gate staff. You'll have to come in if there's the gate staff should tell the next people, but you should check in at least once each shift to make sure everything's going okay. Preferably at the start, maybe at the middle as well. It's a lot of oversight and not a lot of hands-on management necessarily, but you need to hover a little bit. Need to count money until you should probably be there for. You should be there for every money drop. Um, shift changes to count money. Not necessarily necessary, but you should probably do it anyways. Keep trying, or you need to keep track of the money in the till. Work with the event coordinator to do money drops. Said that already. Uh, Supervise gate staff. Kind of talked about that already too. Uh, Close the gate each day. You need to open and close the gate each day. Um, Depending on who holds the money at night, so the event coordinator might be the one holding the money. So for the gate, so you need to talk with them to get the till and the setup gate. So you need to figure out how you want to do that with the event coordinator. But generally speaking, you want to be there when gate opens and when gate closes. Preferably be sober for these things because it's dealing with money. Um, and at the very end, you give final tills to and all the sheets to the event coordinator. So the sign-in sheets and the money till add ups for each shift. They just give all paperwork, all gate stuff, give it all to the event coordinator, and let them deal with that. But try to make sure you keep a running total, so it's easier for them to total up the money at the end when they're doing the books. At the event, I said this before, write a thank you post. Thank your staff. Thank anyone that was not on your staff that ended up helping you. Just be positive and make sure that people felt the event was a good experience. Um, Also, optimal but nice. Write up what went wrong, what went right, what you need to improve. Again, it's nice to reflect on what you can improve upon. Maybe you'll stumble upon something that you did not expect to work and it actually worked really well. Again, award recommendations, hand them out to the event coordinator and also submit them yourself. I think I'm going to just rather than going and or just submit them to yourself. Dimitri had a question going back to feast stuff. Who, in my view, is responsible for setting up the hall for feast? Um, Generally, the feast manager should have an idea of the layout that they would like. They've talked with the event coordinator to kind of get the feel. One position I'm not talking about is uh, ambiance manager or something like. Um, I forget what they're calling it now, but someone that takes care of the thematics and the looks and stuff like that. You could work with them if your event has that. But generally, I have generally in the past, if there wasn't a preset like this is how things are going to be set up, I would go out there, get a couple of volunteers, like I want my table set up in this pattern or whatever pattern is appropriate. Maybe it's if we're doing a sit down service, they need to have easy access to the tables. If they're doing a buffet, the easy access might not be as important, but you need to make sure lanes are open for court if you're having court in the feast hall. So I think I'm not sure it's necessarily the feast manager's responsibility, but it's something as feast manager that I always took upon myself to make sure it was set up. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, honestly, if I was working with you, um, Demetria, and as a service person, I would probably just ask you to manage the hall to make sure it was set up how you liked it. Um, just because you're the one serving, you're the one out there walking around. So whose responsibility is situational, but I think the feast manager should have some sort of say in it, um, if it is not already predetermined. Demetrius says usually when I've run serving, it's ended up falling to me to make sure things get set up. And if I don't, people don't really know who it falls to. So yes, that answers their question. So I guess I might have been more unique by taking a more hands-on approach. Um, sounds like in their experience, but someone needs to take charge of it. Why not the person in the kitchen? They could be flustered though, so I mean, the event coordinator is really ultimately the buck stops there. It's the event coordinator in the end. They should have thought about that and assigned their responsibility if they didn't want to have the responsibility themselves. Program manager or warcrat. Um, this is a bit more complicated. I have found that breaking the program manager into multiple people instead of just having a warcrat is the way I like to go nowadays. Um, for example, has someone to run games, has someone to do tournaments. Um, you should have at the minimum. I think it is best to have someone running tournaments and someone running games. So while the person is running the tournament, the person running the games can start setting up the games and vice versa. And they don't really overlap the duties and pre-work. So I think having at least two people um, is ideal. So I wouldn't really lump them into one, although I have for this outline, but their duties can translate. For Pack War / Olympiad this year, we actually have several Warcrats. We have Miller Time doing an archery tournament. We have Heron working with Sir Brett to run the main Olympiad tournament, and we have Nakadai running the games. So we actually have three people um, doing war stuff. Um, But before the event, they needed to talk with the event coordinator to determine time slots and what kind of content you would like. So, do you want tournaments or in battle games? Is it um, mostly tournament focus? Is it mostly battle game focus? Is there a good mix? For Shattered Kingdoms, it's a completely different question because we're running basically themed battle games and quests the whole entire event. There's no tournaments. We actually have for this year's canceled, but we're postponing it to next year. This year we have two people helping with quests as well as myself. So we actually have three people working on the quests and battle games, and then all staff can like submit ideas for that. So it's actually a group effort for um, my event, but it's a little bit more unique, I think, in how the programming is ran. Generally speaking, just having the two main content streams is appropriate. Plan games and tournaments according to the time slots given. So often the event manager, like, this is the kind of the time slots I'd like. They should know like how long a tournament should run. So like 3 hours, for example, is decent time. And they kind of make a schedule and tell the event coordinator that not the event coordinator, sorry, the program manager, tell the program manager you need to fill these slots. So they'll make games appropriate to those slots to try and fit in those time slots. They need to find volunteers to help Reeve. They can talk to the guildmaster of Reeves to help with this. That's hit or miss in my experience. So really need to take it upon yourself to find Reeves and or timekeepers, scorekeepers for games, record keepers for tournaments, and etc. etc. Um, just try to make a list of the volunteers you know you'll need to be able to, at a minimum, run the things you like. Extra volunteers beyond that just makes for a smoother event, but make sure you have your minimum because there is a minimum. You just have to figure out what that is. Usually you'll be able to hit your minimum. Um, but it's a good idea to pre-plan that. Um, oh, post the rules for your games and tournaments ahead of time. People probably won't read them, at least not very many people, but just having them out there so some people besides yourself will be knowledgeable, especially if it's a tournament or that people are not used to. Like Winter Bash, we ran a tournament that they're more used to out east. That's kind of like what the Olympia does, and kind of like the MHOG tournament at Keep, where it's brackets, where it's round robin, not brackets, sorry. So pools where it's round robin, and then you do a top 8 seeded from those pools. So that was a new format. So we tried to have that posted ahead of time. Nakadai for Winter Bash also made a point to post his game rules ahead of time. I'm not sure how much that helped him, but it's important to try and do that so it's smoother at the field. Uh, so that's basically the before the event stuff for the program manager. During the event, make sure the reads know the rules of the game. I mean, you can do that before the event if you know the rules or the reads that you're going to have, but make sure the reads know the rules for your games or the rules for the tournament, and it's best to give your reads a rundown of what you expect from them. Um, Prepare games before the time slot. So you should. This is why alternating tournaments and games are important. So the person has a chance to set up the game. Sometimes event coordinators will actually hard code this into the uh, schedule. It's given enough time for people to actually um, set up the game. But it's important to set up the game before the game is supposed to take place, so things run more smoothly. Um, Running games based on the schedule, that seems pretty straightforward. Try to keep your schedule as much as possible. Going over is not ideal. Starting late happens a lot in Amtgard, but trying to run at least within your time slot so the next person can try to run things on time. So it's important to be as close to the schedule as possible. For the people running the tournaments, keep track of tournament streaks and winners. So people that are low level warriors will get their streaks. So it's not just about the winners; it's about the streaks within the tournament. So you need to make sure you keep track of that. And then you also need to hand over your tournament results to the event coordinator, so they can do the appropriate paperwork in their main post. They can post about the winners. They can submit the awards for the streaks, etc., etc. After the event, write a thank you post. Also, do your what went wrong, what didn't go right, wrap up like to yourself, so you can know what to improve upon. Hand over award recommendations and submit, and also submit them yourself again. So I'm going to break for a second to see if anyone had any more questions. I'm going to chug this beer and open another one. All right, no questions. So move on to safety officer. So safety officer and honestly have not really used a safety officer. I'm going to explain what it does. It wraps up medical and security. And these things will be very dependent on your state. For example, Oregon has a strict definition of what security is. So in Amtgard, unless we have licensed professionals, can't really call them security. I've started to call them constabulary. Um, in medical, we can't really say that we provide a medical service, so we can't really have medical staff unless we want to be liable. This is just Oregon. This could be different for other states. Uh, so what I say a safety officer it does is they head the constabulary, basically badge checkers, and make sure people have paid to get in, so they have their wristbands. Check to make sure everyone's being safe. They're there if they need to call the police because they're not supposed to handle serious situations themselves because they're not actual security. Um, and medical, I don't have actual people on medical staff. What I have is the safety officer keeping a record of all the licensed medical people that know CPR and first aid, stuff like that. So there's a list of people that we can ask if they would like to help in a medical situation. They are not required to because we cannot provide that service, and they can take it upon themselves to administer aid. Safety officer would also have like a first aid kit. We can have a first aid kit. That's fine. So that's how I would ideally run medical insecurity is wrap it up into one safety officer. Before the event, they need to secure that list, medical list. They need to get volunteers for the constabulary. Um, they need to work with the event coordinator to know exactly what the rules are for the site. And like for example, smoking. If they can only smoke in designated areas, the constabulary needs to know where are these areas so they can tell people to go smoke in those areas, stuff like that. Um, and those are basically what they do before the event. At the event, security person or the safety officer manages the constabulary personnel, keeps in contact with the event coordinator. It's pretty straightforward. They're just managing their team. For Shattered Kingdoms, I didn't have a safety officer for several years until the year before. So 2018, there was a kerfuffle, and I had to deal with it, and the monarchy had to deal with it, and um, the guy was angry and kind of violent. People had to hold him back. So after that point, I decided I would have at least one person to be a point of contact for security. I don't necessarily need a security team as a small event, but larger events, you should have a constabulary team. Um, and then after your event, same, what did I do right, what did I do wrong, what can I do better, and awards, recommendations. Same thing every um, event or every position should do. Then clean team manager. This is I talked about this a little bit at the very beginning when I was talking about uh, the site manager. You can just have the site manager be the clean team manager and give them a responsibility at site, so they can feel like they did more. If they want to be more involved, they don't have to be. But clean team manager is responsible for before the event to learn the site. Usually, probably via map, they don't actually have to be at the site, but they kind of need to know where the buildings are, where the campgrounds are. Um, so, what areas do they need to be cleaned, such as buildings, camping areas, drilling loose areas, kind of like the area that they need to cover. They should kind of know that going into the event. And then they need to gather volunteers, just like Gate or Program Manager or Feast Manager. Just try to get some people ahead of time so you don't just rely on people at the event. So, during the event, they need to organize the volunteers at the event and give instructions. So you should tell them, for example, this is where the garbage cans are. This is where the main trash cans are. Here's where the cleaning supplies are. Here's where the toiletries are. Stuff like that. And then explain to them that when you see a full garbage can, you empty it, put a new liner in it, you throw the garbage away. Um, if toilet paper's running low, you put more toilet paper in the bathrooms, stuff like that, and just kind of organize them. You can set them up for shifts if you really want, but I think it's best if you just kind of like have roving people, like people that are willing to stop in the middle of what they're doing when they see a garbage can is full. Those kind of volunteers. So it's more of a low maintenance, full time volunteer position for the event stuff, for the event, um, for the event. And so the clean team manager just manages those people. Um, And then on the last day, this is kind of after the event because the event's over, but it's still during the event really. Clean up the buildings, camping areas, and general use areas. Be as thorough as possible. The clean team manager with the event coordinator should go through all the areas to make sure everything is clean. If the volunteers have already left and they didn't do everything to the specifications of the site manager, the contact manager, they need to go through and clean up to the best of their abilities with the event coordinator and the volunteers. That is their responsibilities. Then do a thank you post, then do a what went right, what went wrong evaluation, and hand over award recommendations and submit award recommendations. And that's pretty much that is all the positions for an event. And to run the event, you need to know what all these positions do, and you need to be able to manage those positions. And that's really how you run an event. Hopefully, that demystifies it. It's a lot of stuff, but I think it's pretty digestible. Um, are there any questions? And it doesn't even have to be about event or event running. Be just random. What do you think, Baelnorn? Or what do you got going on? What do you have going on? What are my takes? The hot takes. I mean, it's also and ask me anything, so it's not just about event running. But I wanted to make sure I had something to talk about for an hour. I'm actually surprised I didn't drink more beer. I only drank 4 beers in the last hour and a half. I guess I talked too much. It actually went on for about an hour, so I might call it since I really have nothing else to talk about. Um, I guess I can talk about what's going on in my life. Um, Not much, as with everyone else. We're all quarantined except for the essential workers. Can't really go out and do much. But I've been watching streams a lot. It inspired me to actually finally do the stream that I've been talking about since December. And hopefully I'll try to do it once a month if I can get the interest. But I've been watching like Critias, Delos. I'll watch a bit of my God, completely mind blank. Um, Travis or Trevor, sorry. Ormus, that's his Amtgard name. Watch a bunch of their streams and fighting streams, and got inspired to really get back into fighting. But sadly, it's quarantine, so I have no one to fight. But I'm going to try to keep that positive motivation going forward to when I can actually fight again. Got some good feedback on my fighting, and I kind of know where to go with. Thinking about hitting the gym with my brother once the gyms open back up, just to get back my endurance. I need to get some burst speed because I have no speed in my legs. And then basically, I know my basics, but I need to build on that foundation I have and move forward. I have no specific um, award goals or anything like that. I don't think I'm going to be a sword knight or anything, but I want to be someone that people look at and go, he knows his stuff. And to some people, I'm already that way just because I have a lot of theory and I have a lot of knowledge. My body just can't do everything that I know about, and my mind isn't necessarily there to pull apart a fight in the middle of a fight. So I need to work on sharpening my mind. Um, so those things I'm working on. Um, what's everyone else doing in their downtime? Gustav says not really much of anything. I get that. Gustav and I have also been talking about doing some shields, making some shields after this quarantine's over. He also says I don't have anyone to fight or video equipment to do my own things. So that's true. That can make it hard. Like I've been wanting to fight. Like Indra's been wanting to fight, but like it's quarantine, can't really do it. And my brother is not a fighter, so I can't really fight him. And he flinches a lot, so I can't just use him as a Pell. Although I've considered it, and I don't have room for a Pell. But I definitely need to work on refining my footwork. And I've been doing that in my living room. Would my brother stand still and let me hit him for a video? Um, maybe for a video? Why? What do you have in mind? Oh, he says triangle footwork, steel sword, punch shield. Yeah, I could probably do those. I know the theory behind punch shield a lot better than I can actually do it. But it's similar to hand blocking with a single sword. Oh, and yeah, some outlines you could send me. Okay, I mean, I'd like to see those outlines regardless if I do a video because I'm interested. I'll talk to Billy, and then maybe his fiance could hold the camera, and I might be able to do a half an hour class. So what kind? I did use a punch shield. Oh, punch. Oh, I'm thinking a small punch shield. No, you're right. Regular punch shield. Sorry, I don't know why I was thinking of a small punch shield. Yeah, I do punch shield. I know the basics of that, although my execution is pretty poor. But yeah, I could talk to my brother and see if he'd be willing to let me hit him, and see if his fiance would be willing to hold a camera. We could do that. Might do that for a Dusk Hollow half an hour vid in a couple weeks. Or I could do that for no, I couldn't do that for beers with Baelnorn. I probably shouldn't drink in public parks. It's a bad idea. But yeah, it's a good idea. I'll talk to him and see about doing another video in a couple weeks about fighting. I've been wanting to do that ever since Cretius did his first video for Dusk Hollow. So it'd be fun to get the chance. But going back to the shield work with Gustav, Gustav's gonna. I basically know how to make a shield. But my man at arms Oswald doesn't really. So us three after the quarantine are going to go to Gustav's and work in his garage. We're going to do shields. Then I'm going to show Gustav and Oswald how to plasti dip, and it's not too complicated. It's just limited by your creativity and your ability to glue things in the paint and to visualize your project. But it'll be fun to do that. I'm gonna want to do another shield because mine's getting really old, kind of ratty. I'd show you the shield, but I left it in the car. But it's at least 10 years old. And I got into Plasti Dip because I didn't want to sew cover. I thought it would be more fun to Plasti Dip than to try to learn how to sew cover. So I Plasti Dipped instead. I know that doesn't make much sense. It's more work, but I felt it was easier. I don't like sewing. I'm not. I don't practice makes perfect, but I just get frustrated with the machine, and I don't really know how to problem solve. So it makes it with sewing machines. So it makes it even harder. So let's. Is there anyone else have anything to talk about what they're doing in the downtime? All right, so guess I'm gonna call that here. First beer of Baelnorn. I think it went all right. Um, Liked a little bit more engagement with the people, but first stream, so have to get more viewers next time. I'm going to be posting this to YouTube as a ongoing series. Hopefully, I'll try to do this once a month. Um, Hopefully, we'll get more people. I'm not sure what the topic will be next time. If I get a bunch of people that just want to talk and BS, we could just do that. But I like to have a little bit of something planned so I can fill the void, as it were. Maybe I'll just have some talking points. But look for sometime in May, and I will post my Facebook page, Baelnorn. It's facebook.com/Sir Baelnorn, or you can go to my blog, baelnorn.com, and keep apprised. Or I also have a Baelnorn YouTube channel. My YouTube channel has been playing in the background just to keep something for people to watch. Hopefully, um, I'll get some more content from YouTube, but it's hard with the whole quarantine thing and all that. All right, thanks for everyone watching. I will see you next time.